If you see them waistline and see them Hannah curl, cause we blazing Chutney all over the world. Guyana, South Africa, or even Pakistan. It don't matter at all cause we is one global Indian.
Wait, that's great. Thank you.
Welcome to the Global Indian Podcast, the world's greatest journey and the official platform for people of Indian origin. Because let's face it, we are everywhere. Welcome back to The Voyage. This is Season 1, Episode 6, Made in the Caribbean. My name is Rajan Nazran and I explore. For over a decade, I've traveled the world piecing together the kaleidoscope that is our community. I've been held hostage, faced Ebola and met extraordinary individuals, often in destinations that would surprise you. In this season, I'm joined by my dear friend, screenwriter, actor and social heart, Kulvindher Ghir. And together we're taking you on a voyage for the ears as we plunge into the human experience of being a person of Indian origin and taking a closer look into the countries that we now call home. This and the next episode is an ode to the power of music and survival. When recording the conversation, it all took a turn, and we were very fortunate that our guest was incredibly open about her experiences, and we thought it would only be fair if we split the conversation into two. So in this episode, you'll be meeting this extraordinary soul, a global Indian who is bringing Chutney music to the world. We get to learn more about this incredible genre that has emerged, that is as Indian as Bollywood and Bhangra, but yet is to be discovered by the masses. And we'll also learn about the struggles of being an artist and the expectations that go hand in hand. In the next episode, you'll be part of her courageous personal journey, where she talks about how she survived a brutal relationship that nearly cost her her life. We'll look at the role of Asian women in culture, the signs of abuse, and how she's looking to make a difference. Look, this is a remarkable episode, and I bring you on this incredible conversation with a global Indian who has a heart, who's making a difference, and importantly, somebody that I think you need to know. Welcome to a conversation with Anisa Singh.
And just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move. Get up.
What on earth is Chutney music?
It's just really awesome danceable music that I think everyone can vibe to. So it does have its roots in India, but what happened is, when our Indian ancestors came to Guyana, to Suriname, to Trinidad, keep in mind there are other different cultures there as well, right? Guyana, if we're talking about Guyana specifically alone, there's 6 different races. You have the Portuguese there, you have Africans there, you have Chinese there, you have the Europeans, and it's just a huge melting pot. So when Indians came over and brought their sounds, their dholak and their dantal and their harmonium, it just got fused eventually. So initially, it started off as just traditional Bhojpuri folk music that was primarily sung in like the mandirs as religious songs. So it would just be the harmonium and dholak singing religious music. And then it wasn't until, I'm not sure what, now mind you, our ancestors came in the 1800s, right? So I don't know at what point it started morphing into something that's outside of religious music. As far as I know, the earliest recorded Chutney song, I think, was somewhere around 1968 by a guy named Ramdeo Chaito from Suriname. And it was basically the same thing that you were hearing in the mandirs, harmonium, dholak, dantal. But now the lyrics are not just religious. Now we're singing about different things. And it was pretty cool. And it was kind of refreshing. We had most of the songs were talking about daily life, about the struggles of daily life. And then you had songs, a lot of songs about food. I don't know why. We sing a lot about food.
Yeah.
And then around the same year, you had a female artist that started recording chutney music, also the very typical harmonium dholak style. Her name was Drupati, also from Suriname. And then Trinidad, a year later, you had Sundar Popo, which now all these three, I think collectively are like, you know, the parents of chutney music, at least in the Caribbean. Between the three of them, they really took chutney music and started this whole craze. And it wasn't until maybe late 80s, 90s that it started to take on other forms. So then you have some of the African influences, some African drums and sounds that you're hearing in there. It's being mixed with soca and chutney. The younger generation, back in the 90s and even into the 2000s, started collaborating with reggae artists and soca artists. And so, you know, the past, I would say, within the past 40, 50 years, you really started seeing this morph of chutney music from traditional just harmonium dholak style to everything that you can think of that's incorporated in the Caribbean. And I think at that point is when it was able to just get a lot of attention, because it had styles and sounds that now more people are familiar with and more people were able to enjoy.
Because you're a big star in the chutney genre of music, and I remember hearing one of your songs. It's almost like Daddy Yankee meets Gadasman from India meets somebody else along that line, someone has the English genres. And it just works. It comes into one thing. But for those who aren't familiar with this type of genre of music, you bring in words that are from Bhojpuri, but you also have Dutch words as well. Is that correct, from Suriname?
It depends, right? So the Suriname chutney is still very different from the chutney in Guyana, because they're primarily Dutch. So there are many songs actually where they would sing their version. I'm like, but that's not the word we sing in Guyana, or that's not the words they sing in Trinidad, but it's the same song. So they're primarily Dutch. In Guyana, we're primarily, you know, English. Same with Trinidad. Trinidad and Suriname, I feel like they were able to hold on to more of their language than Guyana did. So there's hardly anyone in Guyana who speaks Hindi fluently, you know, maybe a handful. But my grandparents don't, I think, okay, so on my mom's side, it was my great grandfather who came from India. So it's not that far down the line. My grandfather was born in Guyana, spoke to his father, but he knew Hindi you know, a little bit of Urdu, a little bit of Hindi. But my parents don't. My mom, nothing at all. And my grandfather had 11 kids. None of them speak Hindi at all. I probably know more Hindi than they do, only because I watch a lot of Bollywood movies. But that's it, you know? So we still have that. We still have the culture, but the language not so much. Not as much as Suriname held on to it. I mean, anyone in Suriname speaks Dutch fluently. They speak Hindi fluently. You know.
Wow. So what did chutney music mean to you? Was it almost a sense of Indian identity then? Is that where the roots go forward?
Yes. So I was born in the US. I was raised in New York. And my early days I was listening to, you know, pop, hip hop, country. Yeah, I don't know. But I grew up listening to, you know, a wide range of genres, but not so much the chutney or the Bollywood music or anything like that. It wasn't until my dad had done a fundraiser back in the late 80s, and he hired a local, you know, West Indian band, and he had some chutney dancers and things. And so I went to this show, and I was intrigued by this music. And I saw this one girl do you know, this dance, this performance. And immediately I'm like, I want to do that. How do you move your hips like that? I need to know this. So she came over and she taught me how to do the hips. I was like, oh, okay. And I took that and I rolled with it in every song. I rolled with the hips and the hip hop and the pop. And I started listening to Bollywood songs and started watching Bollywood movies. And then in 1994, we actually moved back to Guyana. And I went to high school there.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was interesting. I used to go back a lot, so it wasn't too much of a culture shock. We used to go every summer. But then when we were living there, I was able to become more immersed in the culture itself. We used to go and see Bollywood movies every Sunday. They would have a double feature. I was there. Chutney music was playing all over, but then I heard a lot of soca and a lot of reggae. And I started dancing myself. And in my dances, I started fusing everything together as well. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is cool, and I could do this because I'm familiar with many different genres. It wasn't until as I got older, I saw that everybody was doing this anyway.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I understood Chutney to be, is a fusion, you know, because I'm there listening to Bollywood music and watching these Bollywood movies, but then Chutney music is there, kind of the same, kind of not. And it wasn't until I really started seeing, you know, people of all ethnic backgrounds listening to Chutney, singing Chutney. Oh, well, because you have this element in there that you like and you're familiar with it. And so that's what it was for me. It was this melting pot, and I appreciated that because I always considered myself a big melting pot as well.
Yeah.
You know.
So would you say Chutney is a evolution of Indian music, or would you say Chutney is its own genre, is the music of the Caribbean? Because you have the same thing in South Africa, which I was really shocked with. I don't know if you saw that, Khalid, but you've got the same genre of music, Chutney, in South Africa. You have it in Mauritius, you have it in Fiji, and this is before the internet generation, before we had this massive boom of mass media. So
yeah, that's crazy. I have no idea. I mean, right now, I do believe it is a genre all on its own. Because it is very unique, because it has its own element to it at this point. And I would like to see Chutney become a recognized genre the same way soca is now becoming a recognized genre, and reggae. But then you have reggaeton that's also a recognized genre. So if you could recognize reggaeton and salsa and cumbia and all of those as their own genres, for sure, for absolute sure, Chutney could be its own genre. However, we can't forget, for me, it's you know, the Indian Bhojpuri folk music is where it came from. Absolutely.
wow, because you also have Chutney Bhangra as well, I saw.
Yes, and I think Bhangra is also because it came from, you know, the same. They all have the same roots, but still they took on different forms. And Bhangra is still very different from Chutney, so that's in itself another genre. It should be in its own category. It should be recognized.
I can tell why all your Chutney music's about food. It's just from the name itself, right? It's like 50 Shades of Chutney.
Yeah, I love it.
It's wow. Well, what's the biggest misconception other artists have about your music? Because with your band that you have touring around, you mentioned you have people that are Persians, you have a Pakistani photographer. It's almost like the United Nations in your own group that go around there.
Absolutely.
But then you are almost sensitizing them to this new thing. So what was their preconceived idea? And what was it after, once they've realized it, that they realized actually this was a massive misconception?
They each, interestingly, they each had a different outlook on it. So you have this one guy, our bass player, who played a lot of like rock, like country rock and things like that. And he absolutely loves it. He says if he could just play Chutney music the whole time, every gig, he would want to do that. And this is, you know, a man in his 60s from Indiana. You know, it was great to hear that. And then you have our Pakistani photographer, who is very familiar with, you know, everything on the Indian side, you know, Bollywood music, and also speaks, you know, Hindi and Urdu fluently. She didn't understand what the song, because she's like, you know, none of these words make sense. What are you saying? I'm like, I don't know. I was gonna ask you what so, because I mean, even though I don't speak it fluently, I make sure I know what I'm singing, and I get it translated, and I get the idea, you know, from a bulk of the words, but I always make sure I have my songs translated before I actually go on stage and perform it. And so I was asking her right before a tour, I'm like, hey, Sana, what was it saying? She's like, I have no idea. This is not Hindi. I don't know what she was like having this conniption. She's like, this is not Hindi. And I'm like, but yeah, it is. And she's like, no, it's not. So it took, so then, you know, we sat down, we talked about, you know, our history and how the words change, and it's like slang and it's a different dialect. And she's like, okay. And then when she really heard us perform it with all the instrumentation and everything coming together, she loved it. She's like, this is really interesting. This is really cool. So we have those people on the outside who've never heard Chutney music before, absolutely loving it. But on the other side, I have had a lot of people tell me and other people in our industry things like it's a decomposed version of Hindi or of Hindi music or Bollywood music, or it's like a degenerated version. And so those, it's like, I just think it's different. I just think it's different, you know? I absolutely don't think anything less of it, and I don't want to put, I think that's where the misconception is because the language has changed over time. I think people think, and I have used this term before, that it's a watered down version of Indian folk music, but I don't really see it that way. I just think it's like it's a morphed, evolved form of Indian folk music.
Absolutely, because you're saying, well, there's Indian music. Even Indian music has its own genres out there, right, and it's subdivided. And this is as much important as well as influential than any of the Bollywood stuff out there. Because some of the concerts that you perform at, you have incredible amounts of people, and some of your fellow artists have excess of 5 million views on their YouTube things. So it's something's moving there. Kuli, you're awfully quiet there.
I'm listening. You're doing really well. I mean,
thank you.
It's listening.
It's a haircut. It's a haircut.
It's a haircut.
No, because I'm just listening, and because how much I know of music. I listened to your last 3 recordings that Rajan sent me. One was Warrior, and there was another one which to do with the car Corolla.
Yes.
And then I think you did a fusion of from a couple of songs from Bollywood that you shot in Venice or somewhere.
Yes.
So,
that
was the last thing that you did there was Warrior, or which was the last piece of work that you've done?
Yeah, so that's when we had started crossing over. So the chutney industry.
But for yourself, in that respect, whether you represent the chutney industry or not, for yourself, you talked a lot about evolution, how music develops and allowed to be developing. For yourself now, how do you see that developing further?
So we've been in the chutney, my husband and I have been in the chutney industry for over 20 years. I think this would be 22 years for me and about 25 for my husband. And we started, you know, just like everyone else, started at ground zero, worked our way up. That song with the Corolla, Texanita, that came out towards the end of 2009 and pretty much immediately shot to #1 and stayed on the charts for a good year. And from then, that opened up so many doors for us. And that's when we started traveling, you know, to Europe and across the Caribbean and across the States, was primarily from that song. And we did well. And it wasn't until about maybe 3 years ago, we realized that in the chutney market, we felt capped. So we weren't #1 in the industry by any means, but we were there. We were up there. You know, I would absolutely consider us like one of the top bands in the US. And then we were doing the same gigs as everyone else, sharing the same stage, sometimes headlining, sometimes opening, sometimes headlining. But then we just kept doing that. over and over doing the same thing. And so there wasn't any more room to grow. And so what we decided to do about 3 years ago was to cross over into the mainstream American market. And we've taken 20 years worth of experience and knowledge that we gained over here, and we've been making strong headway in 2 years alone. And so our plan is we need to get that foot in the door to a larger stage, to a larger platform. And once we can do that, then we're going to start bringing in elements of chutney music, so we could show not just the Caribbean or a couple of countries what chutney music is. We want to show the world what chutney music is, because if everybody who hears it likes it and appreciates it, I'm sure if we could get this on a global scale, it'll do well, and maybe then it'll be considered an actual genre. And so that's our thing. That's I think our evolutionary plan is to somehow be able to get to a bigger platform to show chutney music on that bigger platform.
Has the power to stereotype groups of individuals. Reason why. On chutneymusic.com, the guy sent over a message saying, do you feel chutney music is to blame for the stereotypes of Indo-Caribbean in terms of them? And then Kuli, for you, the correspondence part to that is, do you feel that that could be something relatable to our community or our understanding of music or how it's represented in the UK?
First of all, how Bhangra music came into Britain itself and how it kind of developed and went into what it is today. First of all, yeah, we could only celebrate it at weddings. That's when music started, when bands and singers started to sing. It's at a wedding. So then the association with alcohol came in that respect. But that's nothing to do with the music. But right. we've looked at it. We already starting to label it to say, well, actually, Sikhs are like this and they drink, and that makes them quite loud and quite boisterous, and because that's what we start associating that music with. Bhangra, we know it's not about that. It's folk music. It's come from the land. It's come from all the way from there. But it's very uplifting.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So we can't. We have to stop saying those stereotypes for a start.
Okay. Yeah. No, I get that, because it's where it's originated from.
Yeah, and that's why music will. That's why music has an evolution. It has to develop. So it has, whether it be any form of art, whether it be music, whether it be theatre, whether it be, it develops. Its ideas developing. I'm not saying those ideas are new. They don't have to be new. It's how we see them and how we perceive those ideas. Now, I don't think anymore that Bhangra music is labelled with guys who drink too much and go around beating their wives. No, I think that music is far bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be. Because that music is the music of the land. It's the music that we sang, my grandparents sang, and my culture sang. But we can't, we can't associate everything in a moment.
Right.
Neither that we are. Okay, so Anisa, what's your response to that as well then?
I think that's a great question, because it has been an argument going around in the industry for a while. And I don't agree with that. I do not think that chutney music is to blame for anything. So there's two sides of this. There's on the one side, from an artist's perspective, an artist is we're really trying to create and release that song that's going to do well, that's going to make a hit. We've tried the different things. I've tried many times to create a positive chutney song that's not about food, that's not about rum drinking, that's not about sex, that's not about partying. Those don't do well. It just doesn't get the response. You don't hear that. They never make the charts. The ones that make the hits are the rum drinking songs, are the songs about sex, are the songs about partying, and sometimes the songs about food. But it's so as an artist, you're still trying to create a name. You're still trying to make the hit, because that's your bread as a chutney artist, right? You don't want to just come out with a song that's not going to do well. And so that is where all these songs came from, because that's what the audience likes. But it doesn't, I don't think that it is the cause of this. I think the reason why those do well is because that was already there. That's why we chose to sing about it. You know, it's kind of like when the jokes are funnier when they're true, you know?
Yes.
It's the same thing. Those songs did well because they talked about things that were already going on. And so people can relate to them more. That's why they did well, right? And then you have me, who heavily into the chutney industry. I listen to chutney. I love chutney. I cannot sit still when I hear it. I'm not a big drinker. I drink wine. I would have maybe like a Bailey's or an Alizé, you know, something really girly and creamy. I don't drink rum. I don't like rum. So, you know, I can't not clear, whatever. I don't drink vodka or Hennessy 151. Those are the big, you know, Jack and Coke. That's the big chutney stuff, right?
The Johnny Walkers,
I don't like them.
Yeah.
So it has no correlation to me. You know, it's up to you if you want to take a drink. That has nothing to do with the song that you heard. You know,
so you're saying that is your role? Is it unfair then that people almost mark you out then to be social custodians through your work, or are you saying actually my job is as an entertainer to cater for the need and the desires out there?
A little bit of both. I mean, yeah, as an entertainer, that is absolutely our job, is to produce music that we believe a majority of the people will enjoy. And so that's why we do a lot of those songs. But also that's as an entertainer. As an artist, I do believe that we have the power and the ability to change the message that we put out there as well.
Which is why now you're doing more of the empowerment work, the music like Warrior, so on and so forth. Do you think the work that you're doing now would translate back into the chutney world? Because what you've done now is almost a fusion of, let's say, the Rihanna, Beyonce type of mainstream music. Do you think that music would be accepted in the traditionalist, purist chutney forms?
Not yet.
What do you think has to happen then in order? Is that just a natural mental evolution of the audiences, or is it a musical taste of the audiences?
A little bit of both. When I started, I had about, on Facebook, when I started crossing over, I had about 106,000 people, followers on Facebook. And from the time I came out with Warrior, all of a sudden, people are like, what are you doing? And they would just fall off. And so I'm about at 100,000 now. And that's fine. It's something different. People liked, you know, Anisa, or as I was known in that industry, Princess Anisa, for chutney music. And now they're not hearing chutney music. And that's okay. But and right now there's not too much of a chutney element. My intention is to, once I am able to do that, once I have a large enough audience and a big enough platform where I can bridge the two, I will absolutely do that. That's the whole point of crossing over, is to get to that bigger stage, to bring more of my authentic self to that, and with that, bringing more awareness of our culture and our genres.
Because you're not, as some of the trolls that one would have, you're not a sellout. What you're doing is that you're actually bringing more of your authentic self into this and saying, actually, let's have a look at the bigger picture. And what your core belief is that music has the power to change societies or change opinions.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think people see that yet. But they will eventually, once I'm able to make that bridge more apparent. Right now, I can't do that. I need to get a little bit more in the door before I can do that, establish who I am in this new industry a little bit more before I can do that. So I get it, and it's okay. You know, they don't know what my intentions are. They don't have that vision that I do. Once I'm able to bring that to fruition, I think more people will understand. It doesn't mean that everyone will be on board or will like it, but that's just what my intention is. And hopefully the same support that I got with Supertones is going to be the same support I get with Latitude 28.
Fantastic.
I think what's really great to hear is that using your art to change and to have that realization. I think a lot of people miss out on that, where it's not just built necessarily in castles in the air, and not necessarily just fairy tales and dreams.
Right.
It matters.
Yes.
So then, if you care about your art, then it matters for what you want to say through it. And that's, I think, is a form of an artist. Yet you say, as an entertainer, you have to be aware of what's the next best thing. Sadly, what is the next trend? Do you look for that, or do you just instinctively work yourself to say, I just do what I do and what I create?
I go through different moods. There is that business side of me as well that, in order to stay relevant, in order to get to where we're going, we have to stay relevant. And so that's where the entertainment, the entertainer side has to step in and say, okay, this is going to be good. This is going to be good for promotional purposes. You have to continue thinking about that. If I don't, and I just do what I want to do and just sing from the heart all the time, it's not going to have the reach that I want it to have. So there has to be a balance of both. I have to be authentic and be my true self, but at the same time, I have to do what's best on the business side so that I can get to where I'm going and then reach more people that way.
The video Warrior, was that based on whose life? Was it based on your life?
Yes.
Okay, so that was based on actual events that happened to you?
Absolutely. That was a little bit in a nutshell, yes.
Okay.
Why don't you open the nutshell for us? Because you've got a fascinating life, but there's more to the music than just the video part.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was kind of something that I felt needed to be put out there. And so that was I feel like it was important to tell my story. This is something that happened a little over 10 years ago.
Okay.
Or I got out a little over 10 years ago. And more and more over the past 10 years, I've had conversations with people that make me realize, listen, I need to tell my story.
Hey, what a fantastic episode. I'm sure you agree. As mentioned, this is a two-parter. In the second part, Anisa goes into her story, the making of her music video, The Warrior. But importantly, we discuss an issue that is far too familiar to our global community. To find out more about that episode and where you can download, you can either go to the Podbean channel, which is globalindian.podbean.com, or visit us on social media, either on Instagram, which is at the Nazrans, Twitter, Global Indian Pod. Incidentally, if you want to find out more about Chutney Music and Anisa's group, check them out on Facebook. It's Latitude28, or on Instagram, it's Latitude28Band. Important announcement. If you are a Global Indian, or you know a Global Indian, and you like these episodes, and they're meaningful, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. It makes a huge difference and ultimately allows us to continue building a living encyclopedia that delves into the human experience of being a person of Indian origin. Until I see you in the next episode, I hope all remains well. Bye for now.